Imagine this. It's only been 100 days since Donald Trump officially returned to the White House for his second term, and America is already in turmoil. The nation is divided. Protests are erupting across the country. Lawsuits are piling up one after another. And perhaps the biggest headache for the White House, Trump's approval rating has hit rock bottom, the lowest it's been in 70 years. Then there's the tax issue. The new tax policy he just signed have stirred up a wave of public anger. Small businesses are crying out as their costs skyrocket. Consumers are worried about rising prices. And yet, amid all this tension, Trump chose a very familiar way to respond. He's throwing a massive rally in Michigan. Not a quiet speech, not a press conference, but a full-blown show to mark his 100th day back in the most powerful seat in America. A classic Trump-style comeback tour. After 100 stormy days back in the White House, with approval ratings plummeting and protests flaring up across the country, most people figured Donald Trump would lie low, maybe keep things quiet for a while. But if there's one thing we've learned, it's this: Trump doesn't do quiet. On April 29th, he marked his 100th day in office with a bang, hosting a major rally in Macomb County, Michigan. This wasn't just any trip, it was his first time hitting the road since returning to the Oval Office in January. And he chose a stage he knows very well. Why Michigan? Simple. This state was the game changer in his surprise win over Kamala Harris in the 2024 election. And it wasn't just a win, it was a stunner. In a battleground where both parties fight tooth and nail for every vote, Trump pulled off a dramatic upset. During the campaign, he visited Michigan more than 20 times. Macomb County alone, 3 visits. The most recent, the night before Election Day in Grand Rapids. In other words, Trump knows exactly what Michigan means to his political playbook. His return wasn't a coincidence, it was calculated. Inside the Republican Party, the energy was just as charged. Congressman Mike Johnson, who represents Macomb, quickly rolled out the red carpet on social media, calling the event a great honor for the district and vowing to help Trump restore Michigan to its strong and proud standing. Back at the White House, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt sent a message loud and clear on April 23rd. The president was eager to return to Michigan, a place he sees as the launchpad for what he calls a new golden era for America. He didn't need to say much. The rally itself said it all. In the middle of legal storms and public outrage, Trump showed he's still calling the shots, still grabbing headlines, and in his mind, this was just the warm-up. If you think Donald Trump is used to setting records, you're not wrong. But this time, it's the kind of record no one brags about. Just before April 27th, CNN dropped a poll that likely made a few people at the White House wince. President Trump's approval rating had fallen to just 41%, the lowest for any US president, at the 100-day mark since at least 1950. And here's the kicker. The previous record holder, Trump himself, with 42% back in 2017. This time, he didn't just break the record, he undercut his own, setting a new low. Historically, most presidents after World War II have seen their approval ratings hover above 50% in the early days of their terms. Some even hit 60 or 70%. But for Trump, the picture is far bleaker this time around. Worse still is the trend. In just 2 months, his rating dropped 7 points compared to the end of February, and another 4 points vanished in March alone. It's been a steady slide downhill. And here's a sobering stat. Only 22% of Americans say they strongly approve of how he's handling the job, while a hefty 45% strongly disapprove. That kind of gap isn't just a red flag, it's a blaring siren for any leader trying to kick off a so-called new golden era. So, when Trump threw that huge rally in Michigan, it wasn't just to celebrate a milestone. It was a much-needed jolt of energy, a stage-crafted moment to shift the focus and rally his base, at a time when the mood across the country is anything but golden. If Trump's approval ratings are sinking, a big part of it comes down to something every American feels in their daily life: their wallet. And lately, things just aren't adding up for many families. Within his first 100 days back in office, Trump rolled out a new wave of economic and tax policies, and the backlash was quick. A look at the numbers says it all. Hey, let's start with inflation, the headache that never seems to go away for most households. Support for how Trump is handling it has plummeted 9 points, down to just 35%. Prices keep climbing, and people aren't seeing any real solutions. That frustration is growing louder by the day. Then, there's the issue of tariffs. Once hailed by Trump as the ultimate shield for American jobs and industry, they're now being blamed for hitting people's pockets. Approval here dropped 4 points, also to 35%, showing a clear shift in how voters are feeling. Instead of being protected, they feel like they're paying the price. Even Trump's overall handling of the economy, long seen as one of his strengths, has taken a serious hit. Support dropped 5 points, landing at 39%, the lowest he's seen throughout his entire political career. And if you ask Americans whether they still believe he can steer the economy in the right direction, fewer and fewer are saying yes. Just 52% still have confidence in his ability to manage economic issues. That's down a sharp 13 points since In a world where economic uncertainty is already high, these numbers are more than just bad optics. They're a warning sign, because when people stop believing that their leader can fix what's broken in their everyday lives, talk of a new golden era starts sounding more like wishful thinking than reality. When Donald Trump launched a wave of staffing cuts across the federal government, he pitched it as a bold move, part of his promise to drain the swamp and make things run leaner, faster, and cheaper. But instead of applause, what he got was growing skepticism. At first glance, downsizing the government might sound like a smart way to cut costs, but Americans weren't buying it. Support for the cuts dropped 6 points since March, down to just 42%. Why? Because while trimming the fat sounds good in theory, in practice, it feels like essential services are being stripped away. People started worrying about slower responses, fewer resources, and more disruption to their everyday lives. And that's not the only concern. When it comes to hiring the right people for the job, Trump's track record isn't helping. He's always claimed he'd bring in the best and the brightest, but fewer and fewer Americans seem convinced. Confidence in his ability to appoint qualified leaders has slipped by 8 points, now sitting at 46%, the lowest since he returned to office. These numbers tell a bigger story. It's not just about jobs in Washington, it's about trust. And for many, that trust is fading fast. People are starting to ask, if the government feels more unstable and less capable under his leadership, is this really the kind of change they signed up for? When Trump decided to maintain his pro-Russia stance in the Russia-Ukraine war, along with slashing foreign aid, it wasn't just a domestic controversy. It left many Americans feeling uneasy and disappointed. Trump's support for Russia in this escalating conflict caused a major backlash, with many Americans struggling to understand why he would continue to back Russia as global tensions rose. It didn't sit well with the public, especially when the situation was growing increasingly volatile. Moreover, his decision to cut foreign aid programs didn't help his image. These actions were widely criticized, as many Americans felt the U.S. couldn't turn its back on countries in need, especially during tough times. As a result, only 39% of Americans supported Trump's foreign policy, while 60% opposed it. This stark divide showed just how divided public opinion had become. Not only was he losing support from his base, but he was also failing to win over the people who had previously been more neutral. To make matters worse, Trump's approval for handling international issues dropped significantly, from 55% to below 50%. His foreign policy decisions only seemed to weaken public trust in his leadership, creating even more frustration among the American people. Amidst the waves of controversy and public backlash surrounding many of his decisions, there was one rare bright spot during the early days of Trump's second term: his policies toward the LGBTQ+ community. When it came to issues involving non-binary and transgender individuals, Trump seemed to receive considerable support from the public. In fact, 51% of Americans expressed approval of how he handled these issues. Although this wasn't a central focus of Trump's agenda, it stood out in stark contrast to the backlash surrounding other areas like the economy, taxes, and foreign policy. In a time when many of his decisions were deeply divisive, his stance on LGBTQ+ issues emerged as a rare area of consensus. This showed that, despite the controversies, Trump was still able to foster agreement in a field that many believed deserved more attention and respect. While everything seemed to be in chaos, one of the most controversial issues during Trump's first 100 days of his second term was his tax policy, particularly the tariffs he imposed on goods from China and other countries. What made matters even worse was the way he used the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, EPA, to implement these tariffs, even though the law doesn't actually cover tariffs. The legal issue was clear. The IEPA only allows the president to impose sanctions or embargoes, but says nothing about tariffs. This created a legal loophole, sparking a wave of lawsuits. Small businesses were the first to speak up. One of them was Rick Woldenberg, the CEO of Learning Resources, an educational toy company based in Illinois. Venberg explained that the new tariffs had caused his company's costs to skyrocket, and he had no choice but to sue the government. "We have nothing left to lose," he said. At the same time, Jaime Stegmaier, the founder of Stonemaier Games, a tabletop gaming company, shared that over 250,000 of their products were stuck at the border because they couldn't be imported without paying a $1,500,000 0 cents tariff. For a small company, this was a massive amount. It wasn't just businesses that were upset. Many Democratic state attorneys general also got involved in the legal battle. States like New York, Oregon, and Colorado argued that President Trump had overstepped his authority, calling his actions unconstitutional. Even California got in on the action, filing its own lawsuit, claiming that these tariffs were severely damaging the state's budget. Meanwhile, the Pacific Legal Foundation, a conservative organization tied to billionaire donor Charles Koch, led a major lawsuit on behalf of several other small businesses opposing Trump's tariff policy. And so, the legal battles began. It seemed clear that this fight in the courts wasn't going to end anytime soon. In just 100 days, Donald Trump has already stirred the pot with bold decisions and promises that could shape America's future. But let's be clear, a few months in office can't define a presidency. Especially when trust is in freefall, lawsuits are piling up, and an uncertain economy looms. Trump may be pushing for that golden era he envisions, but the real test lies in whether the American people will follow him through these turbulent times. Can he rebuild the trust that's slipping away? Will his vision of a new America materialize, or will it fade into another unfulfilled dream? The clock is ticking, and only time will reveal what the next chapter holds. One thing's certain, those first 100 days have set the stage for a much bigger drama to unfold.